Right, morning all. You can't see my ugly mug at the moment, but what I've been doing over the last many years is also a bit of genealogy, and how that started, if anybody's interested, is when my uncle died in 1983. And very small story. I was evidently working at the time. It's my dad's brother, and I never met my grandparents. They died in the 50s on my dad's side. Anyway, my dad and my dad's sister Hilda cleared out the stuff, and since I had a van, they asked me if I'd come and clear the stuff away and dump it. Well, I didn't. I sorted through 30 or 40 black bags, just general rubbish of my uncle's, as I thought, but I went through it all, and some of the things I found, which might be interest to some people, is the payment of a soldier's payment book. Sorry, I just went to get my glasses. And these are very moth-eaten, and these are soldiers' small books, and these were issued in the First World War. As you can see, it is very moth-eaten. I don't know how to try and save that. I've got to do some research on that. It does show my my grandfather's reg number and his name, and in here it tells you various bits and pieces, which is great for history and research if you can get one of these books. Naturally, it tells you date, his date of birth, etc., where he came from, which is quite a surprise because he actually comes from a place called Findon in Northampton. He wasn't Birmingham born and bred, and he was a butcher, and he was 5'7". Eyes are blue, and various other bits and pieces, and there's his signature down at the bottom. Hope you can see that. And then it lists his mother, his brother, and all sisters, but there's mainly his brothers Arthur and Frank. So there you go. I think it's Frank who was killed in the Second World War, and he drowned in Dunkirk, which I'll go into that another time. So that's a small book, very moth-eaten and very delicate. And also you did get the Soldier's Service Pay book, which is, once again, I hope you can, I don't know whether I'll check this through, you can see that. And that also lists his what he is, a butcher, and his wife, because at this time he's mentioned his wife. I've still got to go through some of these and recheck and double check, because I've done a family history for many years, since just after 83, when computers become a bit more popular in the 90s. So whenever this was filled in, I have no idea, but he's got an entry of kin, which is my grandmother, William Tompkins, etc., who my grandfather was, and various other bits and pieces. And then there's dates. There may be dates in here, or a will. They sometimes scribbled a will to indicate where, if any monies was to go to. That's another little pay book. And then this is a bit older. This is the earlier one, and in the back here at the time is some workings out, and his will, and it basically, in the event of my death, I'll give the whole of my I can't work that, of special effects to my mother, Mrs. Ellen Tompkins, and lists her address, signature, etc. And then his payment book is also listed, and he was a private. How many shillings he got, or pounds he got. There's various dates. 1917 goes back to 1916. Balance credit on the 30th of the 9th 1916. He did serve abroad. If you go back a little bit more, it gets very sort of dirty, back to 1916, 1916, and the book opens on the 14th of the 3rd 1910. I should really wear gloves on these, but as I says, I don't know how to restore them, but I will look into that. Once again, he was in the Worcestershire Regiment, his private number, etc., and when he started, date of attestation, and age on enlistment, he was 19 years, and he was 266 7 days out of 365, so whenever that is, we can work that out. And that's his pay was. It was various other bits and pieces. So anyway, there's some of my grandfather's books from the 1900s. I hope that's of interest to somebody. Anyway, cheers. Yeah, the other thing which is I have, which is my service record of my father. He was in the Navy. He joined up when he was able to, I'm led to believe, which was 1943, when he was about 21. No, he was 20. He was born in 1923, so he's just 19, coming on to 20. Date of birth, order for release. I won't go into all these major details. Then there's the ships. It's like a cotton paper. These are passed on to me by my dad before he passed away. But these are little bits and pieces which are quite interesting. And also, if you're doing family history, always be a bit cautious what you throw away, because you never know when you might need them. And there's little bits of writing, bits and pieces everywhere you can check and recheck. But I'm lucky enough to have one of a few of the bits of these. And also, what was in the rubbish bags from my uncles was a load of, well, apart from rent books, is prudential insurance books, which was an excellent source of history as well. Because what it listed, of course, was the various names and the various policies, which are penny policies. And from this I gathered quite a few names from and to my history, etc. I won't go into all the names. And this is from 1932-33, which was getting on a bit. I've got some of the more modern ones that were also in here. This is 1938, not much in that one, but the address is on the top of here, where my mum and dad, mum and dad's parents, my grandparents lived. Once again, listed Tompkins, which is my dad, etc. My grandfather, my grandmother, and Norman, and Hilda, which is my dad's sister. So this was another little policy. I think it's 1934, this one. They're not in any order, just as I'm just coming across them. But these, and this was 10 Goodress Croft, and this one is back to Ripley Grove, which is quite a famous one. This is quite an old one. Then it lists the various, the Teagers and the Tompkinses, because there's Teager and Tompkins. My grandmother was a Teager, and my granddad was a Tompkins. So that lists quite a few. And this is 1923. I've still got to rescan all these, because when I started doing this it was some time ago. And it's like every other information, the more you get, the more it gives you that research elbow with these. Because a lot of these are Tompkins, then Teagers and Tompkinses. Evidently they must have been part of the family, otherwise they wouldn't be in there. But that was an interesting little book, especially with the address on the top. Once again, I had a lot of aggravation when I tried to sort these all out. And like these, this one here, quite a few names again from the booklet. It doesn't list the address, but this is 1928. And then of course my rent book up to 1970 from my uncle. A couple of old prudential books, Goodress Croft again, etc. And the rent book from 1970, from where my landlord's name. I didn't realise that. And then that lists the rent payable from my uncle at the time of Goodress Croft. Amount monthly, is it £10, 1 and 4pence or something like that? A fortnight or a month, I don't know. It looks like a month. £10, £10, £10, £10, £10, £10. Looks like about £10 a month, which is not bad in 1970, I suppose. This one's the rent book 1959. Once again, gives you a rough idea. I haven't really scanned that. I've no idea. Well, I haven't really looked at that. The gross value of the premises for the purpose of the Rent Act is £36. The rent limit is 27 shillings and 8 pence. So they must have rounded that up once again to every fortnight. But there you go, various bits and pieces. Always comes in handy. Tenant rent books, etc., if you can find them. Cheers. Well, I hope there's a few bits and pieces there. At the moment, it's supposed to be coming up to a bit of a storm, and I think I was trying to sort something out yesterday, which was Sunday. And since I have moved about quite a bit over the last 18 months, most of the family history has been sort of like strewn about here, there and everywhere. And so I thought I'd spend a couple of days trying to sort it all out and put it all in the right boxes. I have a few items as well. If you're interested, I'll try and put those on as well. Don't want to make this too long, but if you're interested in family history, the most basic thing is talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents if they're alive, talk to your aunts and uncles. Our family wasn't very close with aunts and uncles, and which is quite a shame. But just whittle away if you want any information or advice. It's the most simplest form. Get a notepad, write things down, date it when you spoke to somebody or whatever. You hear a rumour, if it's a rumour, fine. Just write everything down. You'll be surprised really in the space of a few years how, if you look at some photos, I mean I took photos in the 70s and 80s, but some of those photos from the 70s, I can't remember the people that were on there, because at the time you're thinking, I know that person, but 40 years later your memory, well mine certainly does sort of like forget. And funny enough, I just on another contact page where I used to live from 1970 to 77, and that area there, and I joined their site, and funny enough somebody came up with a picture yesterday of a neighbour, which was excellent to see, and it brought back many memories. So it's always worth, and it's classic, very gently write on the back, or if not, get some labels, write on the labels and stick the labels on the back if you don't want to sort of indent the photos. And it's always best to try and write something, because you know yourself, if you get photos you think you'll always remember that person, but you won't. You don't. You do not, I'm telling you now. And that's the worst thing. I've got photos there and I still struggle to find out who they are, and I can remember some of the people in my head, but it's like, is that the person? Anyway, enough of my waffling. I hope everyone's had a reasonable February. It's coming to the end of February. I'm just doing a little bit of family history. If I come across a few little bits and pieces, I'll try and show them if it's of interest to you. Anyway, cheers folks, I'll catch you on a bit soon. Cheers.